Hello, welcome to Fun with Failure. Today I wanted to share some stories about school bullies and how justice finally catches up with them. I'm happy to say that most of the stories about school bullies usually end up with a happy ending, where they meet them in the future and they become friends. Although there are some that get what they dished out. I found 5 of such stories that I want to share with you. So I hope you enjoy. Here we go. Story 1. Hey Retard. The story took place about 8 years ago, when I was in 4th grade. Around that time when I was in 4th grade, I was diagnosed with a couple of different disorders, one of which being Asperger's syndrome. Because I have Asperger's, my family decided to file with the school district for something called IEP, an Individualized Education Plan. This plan was supposed to help teachers understand how they can help their students succeed. At the same time, I was also a very gifted student, and therefore was part of the gifted program at my school. There was only one teacher for each grade at the gifted program. The 4th grade teacher was Mrs. B. Mrs. B was not exactly known for her warm-heartedness. Instead, it was common knowledge among students that Mrs. B only acted favorably to the students that she personally liked, most of which were girls. There were 2 boys in the entire class, myself and someone we will call O. Mrs. B was very unkind to O and I, going as far as to get us suspended for taking too long in the bathroom. This story begins on the first day of school. I come into class, and we all have a nice little 4th grade introduction. Mrs. B introduces herself, and everything seems to be going swimmingly, until Mrs. B decided to out me in front of everyone. She told the class all about my IEP, and about how I was special. She also told the class about my disability. The whole class had a jolly old time laughing at my expense. After that, my school life became horrible. Teasing me was all but condoned by Mrs. B, and the whole class, including herself, took part. The 2 worst memories that I have of Mrs. B were the following. The first was a day when Mrs. B decided that I looked down on people, and she decreed that I was only to crawl on my belly in class. Being a young man with Asperger's, I did not tell my parents about this, because I thought for some reason that they would love me less if they knew about all of this. Strange autistic reasoning, I guess. The second memory of B's tyranny is one of my most painful to look back on. I was reading a book in the back of the class. Being autistic, I tend to get lost in books, and the outside world seems to fade away. Apparently, Mrs. B tried to call my name once, and when I didn't answer, she hatched a devious plan. From across the room, at the top of her lungs, she shouted, "Hey, retard!" Unfortunately for me, I looked up and responded with a meek, "Yes." The whole class laughed and laughed for what felt like forever. Mrs. B thought that she had her entire bullying scheme set out before her, and that I would do nothing in response. Wasn't it a shame that the school had recently installed new cameras in every room because of theft problems? Mrs. B had a jolly time bullying me, and I grinned and bore it, because I knew her atonement was coming. Finally, when she decided to reiterate to the class my disability, my plan finally worked. I used my IEP-granted coping mechanism and left the room to talk to my counselor. I went the entire afternoon explaining the abuse that I took from Mrs. B, and told the counselor that the cameras would prove it. Lo and behold, the cameras proved my point. Mrs. B lost her job, and the district paid for me to go to a nice boarding school for kids on the spectrum. I may have Asperger's, but that doesn't mean that I'm an idiot, contrary to what Mrs. B thought. Unfortunately for her, I knew what a civil rights lawsuit was. Doubly unfortunate for her is the fact now that she helps pay for my college. Story number 2, Candy Crush. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I was bullied by a kid in the next grade up. This was decades ago. At the time, my grandmother used to buy me some Ice Gems candy every Sunday when she visited. After a time, I figured I could use them to bribe an older kid called Ashley to give me protection. He was 2 grades up, and he looked Children of the Corn mean. Sure enough, upon first payment, he pounded the crap out of my nemesis. He only had to do that once. He met me every Monday morning at playtime for payment. After a while, he didn't even ask for a whole pack. Not really sure if it was because he really didn't do much after that, or because Ice Gems was kind of crappy. He always seemed to be so pleased to get paid. That guy was really nice. Story number 3. You were warned. I was not bullied as a child, but my son was, much to the regret of the bullies. My son was a shy, introverted, nerdy kind of kid. So to boost his ego, we signed him up for karate at the age of 4. In his class, he was taught respect and discipline, and to avoid confrontation. Then there was the bullies in elementary school. There was a group of 4 boys who picked on my son for about 4 years, although the school was contacted numerous times, and there was a no-tolerance policy, but nothing was done. We were told that the bullies came from a broken home, and that any discipline would be ineffective. At this point, we told our son in front of the school authorities, and the parents, that the next time he was bullied, to fight back. Everyone was outraged, but my wife and I didn't care. We told them that if the bullies stopped, it wouldn't be a problem. The next day, the 4 boys once again confronted my son. When the dust settled, my son only had a fat lip, but one of the boys had a broken arm, and the others lost some teeth. They wanted my son to go for anger management classes. We informed the schools if there was any action taken, we'd sue the district. Nothing ever happened, and my son has not been picked on since. He is now in high school and an extrovert, and he has just received his junior black belt. Number 4. Don't mess with the quiet kid. When I was in year 9 or 8th grade of school, I had been off school for years due to illness, and I had started going back. On my first day in the new English class, I was assigned to sit next to this girl called Lily. She was a blonde girl who probably weighed about 40 pounds. When the teacher announced that I would be sitting next to her, she said, "Why do I have to draw the short straw?" And then on, she would bully me every time that I was in class. She would make comments about my appearance and would say things like, "Aw, do you have a crap life?" She said that because I always sat on my own. Once she came up to me and said, "Do you actually have any friends?" She would also do weird things, like put water bottles behind my head and pretend to tip it over all over me. After this happened a few times, I finally had enough. She was really dumb. I mean really dumb. Because we sat next to each other in English, we had to mark each other's work, and nothing she ever wrote made any sense whatsoever. I thought I would capitalize on this. I was friends with her on Facebook because she was the one who always added anyone and accepted everyone. She had over 2,000 friends. On her profile, she kept nothing private, so I could view all of her contact details, including her phone number and email address. What I did was make an email address pretending to be from our school. From that, I sent her an email, copying the school's usual newsletter format, informing her that Wednesday was a non-uniform day, and that the students should come in dressed as Disney characters. This could easily not have worked, because they usually send these emails to the parents and not the student. And their official email was not from a Hotmail address. But she was dumb. Really dumb. So I kid you not, she turned up at school in a Minnie Mouse costume. I chose this method because the school was very strict about uniforms. You got in trouble for not having your shirt tucked all the way in. So thinking about the students just seeing her turn up in a Mickey Mouse costume just makes my day every time. Unfortunately, I was not there that day. But everyone was talking about it, and thus she was made fun of for a long time afterwards. I heard that she come in to tutor that day and everyone laughed at her. She flipped her crap and they sent her home. I think even her friends called her Minnie from then on. Number 5. Your money's not gonna save you. So I grew up not having a lot of money. Sure, I have a loving family who supports me, and everything was great. We just had a lot of money issues. However, after months of working a job that I had gotten a few months before, I finally got enough money saved for some used Air Jordans. This was huge at that time, and it was huge for me at that moment. I felt as if I've earned these, and my confidence skyrocketed whenever I wore them. That's a little background as to the importance of these shoes, and to put this into perspective about how much this meant to me. So let's meet our antagonist. Obviously I'm going to change his name, but for the relevance of his position, let's call him Money. Money was on the basketball team. He was a prospect for his entire life. He was an absolutely amazing player, and he had enough money from his parents that they funded him to become the best baseball player out there. They constantly hired him personal trainers, the best gear, and, of course, whatever shoes he wanted. He had at least 20 pair of Air Jordans. He was extremely stuck up, and he knew he was the stuff. He got away with bullying multiple kids. He knew he could get away with any trouble among many of the teachers. He exploited almost everyone he knew. He was a horrible person. I knew I had homework to do, so I picked a quiet hallway. As I was just sitting there on the floor, up against some lockers, doing some homework on one of my binders, sure enough, wearing my new Air Jordans, suddenly I hear footsteps. It's only Money. It looks like he's probably going to the bathrooms at the end of the hallway. Whatever, I keep doing my homework. But as he walks by me, he purposefully steps on my shoes. No, not just stepping on them. He specifically made sure that he dragged his feet across my shoes, pushing down the leather, and he made a huge mark on it. I suddenly start seething with anger. "What the heck, dude?" I say this in a slightly raised tone. He does an extremely obnoxious grin. Then he says, "Hey, you should be happy. Maybe some of my money will rub off on you." He proceeds to chuckle and walk away. He purposefully made fun of my lack of money, and stated something equally as bad by saying how much money he had. But worst of all, there was a huge, large dirt streak on my shoes. The shoes that I worked so hard for. I had to do something to him. This was a bully not just of me. This narcissistic fool had to be put in his place. So I devised a plan. I studied him. I learned that he did something after practice. After school every day. After a month of studying, I learned one thing. Every week, he would go behind a local grocery store, which is super close to our school. So I put my dad's video camera in a location where I thought that he would meet up. Sure enough, he stops behind the grocery store. I still vividly remembering myself literally shaking when I put the tape in. When I turn it on, eventually, I see a man appear. The man was scraggly, a little overweight, and he looked like a bum of sorts. Then, about 2 minutes later, Money enters. He looks extremely nervous and timid, yet at the same time it doesn't look like it's his first time. I think you can guess what happened next. The scraggly guy pulls out a dime bag with what clearly appeared to be weed. Perfect. This is perfect. I submitted the video, and the administrators watched it, and they thanked me for the heads up. I knew with our extremely strict no-drug policy that there was going to be some dire consequences. I remember seeing the principal and our school officer walking across the field with Money, and he was escorted out. He never showed up to school after that, but I knew from the gossip that his life was crashing down. He lost all of his scholarships, and his college invitations were withdrawn. He was suspended for 10 days. Basically the rest of the school. He missed all the finals, so clearly his grades were worse. Last I heard of him, about 3 years ago, he was working as a construction worker, and still in the local town. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and subscribe for more in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take very good care of yourselves, and I hope you have a great day.